No.
Okay. Can you hear me now? I see Ivan and Nova couldn't hear me. Can you hear me now? By the way, can you post this on Facebook, on my Facebook? I meant to tap this into Facebook earlier, but failed as always. Dude, that's still too bright. Good Lord Almighty. Okay. Oh wow! All of a sudden we got a flurry of activity over here. First time chatter from Liv Griff says, hear ya. Danny Shoop is in the house. Yev Inkem VT can now hear me. Thanks, first time chatter, Yev. Ivan can now hear me. First time chatter from Daniel. H. Koo says hello. The Crescent 864 is giving me the Velociraptor action. Nova can now hear me. First time chatter from Megafoon up in the hizzle. And Yevon says, is there any way I can turn up the mic? Do I just turn it to the right? Turn it to the right? Turn it to the right? Is that louder?
No, that's not it.
Ah, shit. I turned it the wrong way. Katie's turning it up. First time chatter from Bubba's Fupa, class of 2014, up in this sizzle. Thank you, Bubba. JR Piv says hello. And Yev, hopefully I have turned on the mic, or turned up the mic, and it sounds more louder now. Tristan Torn says, let's just stay in college so we don't get drafted. Boom! Luckily you're not in Russia, or you could be drafted later tonight. Ivan says, talking about Putin today, Velociraptor, yes, and yes to Velociraptor. Mazooz up in the house says, hi, Prof. Hi, Mazooz. And Plaid Katie is asking, is that volume good, or do we need to go higher or lower? Probably always higher, right, my friends? Well, that means you can all hear me and see me, and that means once more, my friends, we are live, in-house, in action from Blacksburg, PA, for the online live World Regional Geography weekly office hour, which is emphasis on week. The weekly is spelled W-E-A-K-L-Y because I've been weak as shit this semester doing podcasting / Twitch hours, and I do apologize. But man, oh man, owning a wine bar and soon to be a whiskey bar, that's a secret between me and you, is really taxing my time in life. It's barely leaving me time to enjoy my alcoholic endeavors. So I do apologize for not doing more podcasting because this has been a fun-filled, crazy-ass semester for current events. And I want to do more, and I need to do more for you good humans. And I'm going to try to do more. But the news story broke this morning at 8 a.m. our time, which was like 4 p.m. Russia time, that Vladimir Putin had made a speech to his great nation of Russia. And it was a speech of such extraordinary circumstances that I felt compelled to do a podcast on them, even though I was ill prepared for it. I'm well prepared for the actual implications and meaningful content. I'm only ill prepared in that I just came from work from another job and don't have a lot of fancy graphics for you. Having said that, I think a lot of people that tune into these particular Twitch office hours, which are the true dedicated professional internationalist savvy smart people, you all probably know the story I'm talking about already, and so we can have more of a conversation than me just doing a lecture. But I'll leave that to you. What do you all know about the story I'm referencing, and do you understand its historic and possibly future giant impacts? Am I the only one that understands what a big deal this was about Vladimir Putin's speech earlier today? Actually, Nova says, we must go much higher. Cleopatra says, higher. Everyone's saying higher, higher, higher. What happened to our audio? How did it get turned off?
No idea.
Okay.
I bumped it a bunch.
Tristan Storm says, thoughts on the rumor that Putin is escalating this conflict because he's terminally ill. That seems like speculation for a tabloid, Tristan. Vladimir Putin is escalating this conflict because he's losing this conflict. And I say that tongue in cheek. For all my Ukrainian friends, by the way, could you close the bathroom door? I don't know what that noise is. I guess the water's running here constantly. The reality here is, I did a podcast about the Ukrainian-Russian conflict months and months and months ago, literally right after it happened. And much to the chagrin to my Ukrainian friends, I said, here's the deal. Russia will obviously win this war. Russia will likely win this war quickly. There's no way in hell Russia can lose this war. I stand by that, by the way. Russia is a nuclear-armed power. Russia is one of the biggest manned military powers on planet Earth. Russia is one of the most technologically advanced militaries on planet Earth. Russia has more tanks, more guns, more helicopters, more landmines, they have more everything than almost everyone on planet Earth. And so I stand by my early assessment that Russia can win this war anytime they want. Now, what I'm getting ready to say may be offensive, so take this tongue in cheek. Russia could win this war in the next 1 hour. All they have to do is launch several nuclear missiles across every fucking major city in Ukraine and kill everybody. They could do that in 5 minutes, and they would win the war. Here's the thing. They don't want to do that. They don't want to be mass murderers. They don't want to look like mass murderers. They don't want to make Ukraine a nuclear-charged atomic wasteland that can't be occupied or useful for anything. So they don't want to use those weapons in order to win this war. But make no mistake about it, my friends, they could. So when we're talking about war in the conventional sense, and we're talking about the Ukrainian army versus the Russian army, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to offend my Ukrainian friends, Russia could still handily win this war anytime they choose to escalate it to a lethal level that will make them look horrible. They have continued to try to not escalate it to a level that makes them look horrible. That's why Vladimir Putin and his whole funky bunch crew in the Kremlin have been debating about this war for now 7 months of how can we win this without looking like horrible people? And they have absolutely and utterly failed at winning this war without looking like horrible people. But now, my friends, mark the day. This is the day they're starting to think about, well, let's just win it even if we look like horrible people. That's why I think this speech is important. And by the way, I'm already getting ahead of myself raging about stuff. This war started in February of this year. This war is not even a year old. As many of us, myself included, called early on, Russia will likely roll over Ukraine. It should be, quite frankly, not that big a deal. Just looking at the military hardware, the numbers of soldiers, the nuclear weapons, one makes the natural assessment. This is a heavily stacked war in Russia's favor. Quite frankly, they should have won it in 30 days, but they wildly overplayed their hand. And I'm not a war strategist, but I'll tell you my opinion because I assume you've tuned in to hear my opinion. My opinion is Russia has failed so far to win this war because they want to win it in a certain way. And the way that Russia wants to win this war is to make themselves look like the good guys. And so they've been telling a story since day one of this war that started back in February of this year, 20 double deuce, They started this war saying, we're here to liberate Ukrainians. We're here to help the Ukrainians who are being screwed because the West has led them down a wrong path, and most Ukrainians love Russia. And Ukrainians and Russia are ethnically and linguistically and historically and culturally related, and we're all one big team. And the poor Ukrainians that are clueless have been led astray by the West, who are evil and horrible and want to kill us all. And so when we, the Russian saviors, come into Ukraine, we will be greeted with open arms as liberators. We're here to save you all. This is a story they told themselves. Vladimir Putin, I think, must have specifically crafted, him and his upper circle, crafted for themselves. And it made them feel better about the fact that they were getting ready to go shoot and kill people that they're culturally, historically, and linguistically and ethnically related to. It makes them feel better about killing their own while they're helping save their own. Does that make sense? Of course it doesn't, but this is what they were telling themselves. So the reason why this war is dragged on for 7 months is because they want to have this good guy image of liberators and cultural saviors of the Slavs, let's say. That Slavs, S-L-A-V, not Slob, S-L-O-B. They want to be the cultural savior of the Slavs, a greater ethnic group that encompasses Russians, Ukrainians, and many other Eastern European groups. So they want to consider themselves the liberators and saviors of the Slavs. And so they can't go and nuclear weapon kill all the Slavs in order to save them. So they crafted this storyline of, we're here to help. I'm from the government of Russia. I'm here to help. And we're coming in to liberate you. And for reasons that most of us still don't understand, the Russian upper echelon or the Russian government thought that was going to work. No one from the outside ever thought that was going to work, but they thought it was. They truly thought that Ukraine was either so weak or that the nonsensical story they crafted was true, that they thought Ukrainians would be like, yay, Russia's here to save us, and all roll over, and everybody would throw down their weapons and be jubilant to rejoin Russia. Only Russian people, or only a small group of Russian people, thought that was going to happen. The rest of us are like, are you out of your mind? Ukrainians have been protesting and have gone to war against Russia multiple times and have been protesting for years or decades to get out of the Soviet Union and to get away from Russian control. So the concept was flawed from the start. But I'm now ranting too much, but that's what I do. The Russian upper echelon truly thought this was going to happen. Vladimir Putin, in his mind of minds, actually thought that a lot of Ukrainians would embrace a Russian liberation movement to free their country from independence and make them part of Russia. They truly must have thought that because, and the reason I'm now suggesting they truly thought that, is because the planning and strategy of the Russian army, one of the most powerful on planet Earth, was now in hindsight so piss poor that they must have thought they weren't going to have to fight at all. So piss poor, they must have thought they actually weren't going to have to fight a war, because they ran in the door and grabbed a bunch of territory, and they've been bogged down ever since. And for those of you that follow current events, you now know that the Ukrainian army fought back with the help of Western weaponry and intelligence. I will tell you straightforward. Fought back last week and regained a bunch of territory that the Russian army, one of the most powerful armies on planet Earth, took from them. So that's why the modern, current, right this second, last 2 weeks of tribulation in Russia. Russia now looks embarrassed. This war looks like the mistake that everyone from the outside knew it was. It looks like the mistake that everyone from the outside knew, that the Ukrainians were not going to roll over and just accept it and become part of Russia. And now, 7 months later, you have entrenched sides where Team West has been fueling and funding and funneling shit tons of weaponry, advanced weaponry, into the Ukrainian army, that now they're a considerable force. It's not going to be easy to take over the rest of Ukraine. So they're at a stalemate, and the fact that it's been widely reported that Russian forces not only lost to Ukrainian army retaking over territory, but many of them defected and or fled the front lines. This is embarrassing as hell to the Russian army and to one Vladimir Putin, the supreme leader / immortal / vampire leader of Russia. So that's got us all caught up. And that's why today's story is one of great importance, because Vladimir Putin, the immortal / vampire leader of Russia, has decided to double down. Let me stop there because I think there's been a lot of comments. Let me stop down and somebody remind me I'm picking up on Vladimir Putin is doubling down, which actually should have been the name of this podcast. Vladimir Putin doubles down for more fun in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin has seen the error of his ways, and he has seen his army being defeated on the battlefield by a power that is 1/10 of the power of the Russian army. No offense to my Ukrainian friends. 1/10 of the power. And he has to be anything but happy. And he is anything but happy. He's embarrassed, and now he was faced with the crossroads of what to do. Should I admit defeat? Should I back off this? Should I simmer things down? Nope! He's doubling down. Which means there are consequences now for Greater Eastern Europe and planet Earth. Let me go to the chat and I'll talk about the rest of the story. The Blind Barber says Vlad gets cancer every month according to my news feed. There you go, The Blind Barber. I agree. Vladimir Putin ain't going anywhere. He ain't going anywhere anytime unless there's a major coup, which happens, it does happen. Vladimir Lenin. Oh my God, the refocus stuff is so horrible.
I didn't have a chance.
Yeah. Vladimir Lenin would have ruled Russia for 50 years, except he had a stroke and died. Rasputin would have ruled Russia for years, except they beat the hell out of him, poisoned him, shot him 20 times, and stabbed him 100 times after that. So anything can happen in Russia. Anything can happen on planet Earth. Anything can happen anytime. But Vladimir Putin, by natural causes, ain't going anywhere anytime soon. He ain't dying of anything. He's not going to die of anything unless there's an assassination attempt, which seems almost impossible. He's a Stalin-esque figure, which means the Russian government is so terrified of this human being, literally terrified, that no one would even talk about a plot against him. It's like having plots against Hitler. Everyone was so terrified of Hitler, no one would even talk about, hey, this guy's not that great. We should probably kill him, because having that conversation will get you killed. So Putin ain't going anywhere. I agree with you, The Blind Barber. He ain't going anywhere. He's not dying of anything. And I think an internal coup against him is more unlikely than I can imagine. However, I can't imagine everything. Crazier things have happened. But it took Hitler killing himself in a ditch when World War II was lost 3 months prior for him to go. That's how I envision Vladimir Putin going. 3 months after he's already lost and everything's burning, that's when he'll die, but not before. So look for him to go out more like Hitler, less like Vladimir Lenin. But then again, anybody's heart could have an attack any second. Nova says, but Ukraine has the president comedian. That is true, and that president comedian has turned into anything but a comedian. He is a quite serious world leader on the world stage right now. Nova. Let's see. First time chatter from Borislav. What do you think about this in a more global concept? Specifically, will it embolden China to fully take over Taiwan? Great question, Borislav. What's happening in Ukraine is actually making China think twice. or the third time or the fourth time, because as I've now suggested for the last 10 minutes, everyone, including myself, predicted Russia would roll over Ukraine in days, if not weeks. That has not only not happened, the Ukrainians are now fighting back and embarrassing Vladimir Putin and embarrassing the Russian army and embarrassing Russia. And China don't like any of them things. China does not like to be embarrassed. China does not like the unpredictable. So knowing what's happening between Russia and Ukraine right now is giving China pause for thought of doing the same thing in Taiwan. Could Taiwan resist as much as Ukraine is? I don't know. But if they did, it would be embarrassing to the Chinese government. And the Chinese government does not like to be embarrassed. So the short answer is, if anything, this debacle, and by any other description, you're just lying to yourselves. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has been a debacle for Vladimir Putin personally and for Russia in general. And by the way, let me add a little piece of facts to this. What Vladimir Putin said earlier today, which is the cause for this podcast, is that he said, he went on national television, international, but it was a national address to the Russian people, and said, hey, so how about this Ukraine thing? We're going to pull up 300,000 reservists to send to the front lines. Now, I don't know if you guys know how military actions work, and I'm not pretending I do. But the Russian regular army has been there for 7 months. The Russian army, the Russian Navy, the Russian Air Force, and the Russian Marines. Do the Russians have Marines? I don't know. Somebody go Google that and tell me. The Russian military has been fighting a war for 7 months. They just lost territory a week ago, and they're calling in reservists. Let me tell you what the Boyer interpretation of this is. Desperation. The regular army is losing, and you're calling in reservists. Now, again, I don't expect you young people to know the difference between the regular army and reservist, but reservists in most military branches are called weekend warriors. They're people that went to boot camp, and they basically go to training once a month or once every 3 months and hang out and drink beer and shoot guns. They're not regular army. And so the fact that you're having to pull these people in to an actual battlefield situation in and of itself is embarrassing. Anyone that knows what's going on, you're like, oh my God. Your regular army, people who do this every day. Again, let me try to refresh your situation here of knowledge. The regular army are full-time people who do it for their life. They're there 9 to 5 or 24 hours a day, shooting guns, running tanks, fighting with jet fighters. This is what they do. It's my life. I live in the military. And they're losing. And they're calling in reservists who are plumbers, lawyers, who run 7-Elevens in Russia, who have training. And you're like, holy shit. Wow. That is, I wouldn't have even said that out loud if I was Vladimir Putin. I don't think he understands what that means in American talk. But in American talk, that basically means, can we get anybody to come help us? We're calling in the reservists, people that don't do this for a living, to help. Because we're failing. You only call in reservists when you're failing. You're like, wow, you should have used some other terminology. Anyway, I've gotten my blood pressure way too high. I know, it gets fuzzy. I think when my blood pressure goes up, the screen gets fuzzy. So they're calling in reservists, and those are, and no, I'm actually not disrespecting reservists. Some of them are fine killers. But if they were full-time killers, they'd be in the military full-time. So you're calling in people that are plumbers and lawyers, and electricians and bricklayers who know how to fire guns to go into an active war zone in which the regular Russian army is losing. This actually spells even more embarrassment in the future, because here's the deal. At the same time that Vladimir Putin made this speech, the Russian parliament came out. It's called the Duma. They came out with ever stricter laws that say if you don't show up for service, you can be imprisoned or killed. If you flee the battlefield, you'll be imprisoned or killed. If you don't do what you're told, you'll be imprisoned or killed. And one doesn't have to be a military strategist or genius to understand the reason they're passing these laws. All these laws are because people on the battlefield are like, screw this, I'm getting the hell out of here. Today was the biggest single day for one-way airline tickets out of Russia. People who are going to get called into this war, I'm sure some of them can't wait to go kill Ukrainians. We call them psychopaths. But most people who are like, oh, shit, I only signed up to be a reservist to get some extra money on the side, and now I'm going to have to go get shot at for a cause I don't believe in a war that we're losing. This is a debacle by any definition from a military standpoint. This is a debacle. Again, I'm a nobody. I don't know jack shit about how the military works, but I was in the military and I know enough military friends, and I'm like, no. I can tell you definitively, this is an embarrassment and a debacle. And when you're pulling in people off the bench, basically you're pulling in your weakest players off the bench and hoping they do better than your first stringers in the battlefield. You're like, oh my God, this is embarrassing beyond belief. However, there's a reason he's doing it. Vladimir Putin doesn't really think that these 300,000 reservists, plumbers, electricians, and bricklayers are really going to turn the tide of the war or kill a bunch of Ukrainians. He's got a different thing in mind for them. They're going to be professional occupiers. Now, I said I was going to talk about the chat room, so one of you bring me back. I said Putin's doubling down and that the reservists are occupiers. Refresh me on that. Somebody type that into the chat room right now. Reservists are occupiers. And when I get to that chat, I'll know that I've caught up with the chat room. Somebody do that for me right now. Thank you. Let's go. First time chatter. Oh, that was Boris Slav. Hopefully I answered your question about China, Boris Slav. China is rightly worried that Russia, a major military power, is losing this war. Tristan Torn says, do you think that Putin is that batshit crazy that he will use nuclear weapons in an absolute last case scenario? Tristan, we all hope. We always all hope that that's not the case. But we always all don't know. He is certainly threatening it. And by the way, I haven't even got to the news stories about what he said today. But one of the other things he said about, on top of calling in 300,000 reservists to go to the front lines, is he said, by the way, Team West, I know you're trying to annihilate and kill all Russians. And just so you know, we have nuclear weapons, and I'm paraphrasing, we know how to use them. So just so you know. A veiled threat, or was it even veiled? Nova says, a while ago, Russia took control of Chernobyl exclusion zone. What do you think they'll do with it? Hopefully not blow it up, Nova. So there's that. No, there's nothing in there left. Trying to think. There might. No, I don't think I have any glasses in here. You can look for some plastic cups somewhere, though. If I'm not mistaken, they lost Chernobyl a bit ago. I think Tristan is right. First time chatter from Marcos BWC with a hell ton of Ukrainian flags. Thank you for that, Marcos. Also, the Russian flag with a pile of smiling poop beside it. Marcos, I'm offended by that Russian flag with a smiling pile of poop. I don't think that poop is smiling right now. Nova says, I feel like it's too late to paint the Russians as the good guys. Well, Nova, do understand, everybody should understand, that Russia controls 100% of their media. 100%. So the Russian people don't know anything. They know nothing. They know nothing except what their government tells them. And their government could tell them the moon is actually yellow. I'm sorry, the moon is yellow. The moon is actually green. Martians are invading. And the United States military is getting ready to kill us all at any second. And they're putting poison in our water that makes us all can't have hard-ons. They can tell their people anything, and 90% of the Russian people will be like, oh my God, that's true, because the government said it. 90's too high. Let's say 50. At least 50% of Russians believe anything and everything their government says because they have no options. I'd like to think that, at least enough Russians, let's call them the other 50%, have access to the internet and can figure out what the hell's going on. But that would be me being too jaded. I try not to take sides. I try to be balanced, and I try to be balanced even on the Russian perspective. So the Russian perspective is that we are being attacked by the West. We've been surrounded by the West. We lost all this territory to the West due to the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. And woe is us. We've been screwed, and the West is still trying to screw us, and the West is trying to destroy Russia. By the way, BTW, Vladimir Putin actually said that today in his speech. The West is still trying to utterly destroy all of Russia. That's almost a direct quote. Now, at that point, I try to empathize or sympathize, whichever. I try to understand all sides of all arguments. But Vladimir Putin, the head of Russia, a smart individual, getting on international television saying, I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that the United States wants Russia to die and every Russian to die and the Russian state to go defunct and be dissolved and kill us all. And it's like, yeah, no, that's a bridge too far, dude. No one really thinks that. The U.S. government doesn't think that. Are the people within the U.S. government think that? Sure. Does the U.S. government as an official policy think that? I don't think so. Does the European Union want Russia to collapse and die and all Russians dead? No. I mean, we, the West, are pretty kind of free-thinking, liberal, open-minded, everybody's equal societies. To suggest to the Russian people, to suggest to the 145 million Russian people that half of planet Earth wants to kill them is too much. And it's a falsehood, and it's basically bullshit. And it's bullshit that can be proven by asking anyone in Team West. So now we're getting into complete and utter propaganda that's easily dispensed with. And Vladimir Putin has now gotten so desperate, that's what he's doing. He's saying, I have to kill all the Ukrainians because all of Europe and America wants to kill all Russians. And that's just an impossibility. It just becomes, and I'm sorry, I'm going to offend people, but it's a Wednesday night and I'm feeling good. This becomes kind of Trump world, that a single individual says something and expects that all of his followers fall in line with it, no matter how bizarre it is. The election was all fake. Everything's fake. Anything that I don't say is fake. Everything I do say is real. And you expect everyone to just say, oh my gosh, yes. Oh, great leader has spoken. Only great leader knows truth. All things that great leader does not believe are mistruths. It's like, come on, dudes. So I actually respect Russia. I love Russia, actually. And most Russians are decent, upstanding, honorable, awesome, intelligent human beings. Russia is one of the most highest educated societies on planet Earth. So for those of you that are still listening, for me ranting now for an hour, don't take this as an anti-Russian diatribe or speech. I respect Russians, and I know they're in a tight spot. Any group of humans that are living under a dictator, and I actually used to like Vladimir Putin, but he's a dictator now. He's a dictator with a secret police that truly and honestly punishes, hurts, and destroys people that disagree with his views or his government. And so if you're a Russian person, you're in a tight spot. Most Russian people likely know this war is utter bullshit and that what the government is saying to them is utter bullshit. By the way, if there's any Russians listening right now, most of the shit the U.S. government says to us, we know is utter bullshit. But we're not in a war right now. So I think most Russians understand what's going on here. It's called propaganda. and it's pro-Russia, pro-nationalist propaganda, make Russia great again. I get all that, but I want Americans to understand, what choice do they have? Putin has a lockbox on power in this country. The people that support him, much like Trump supporters, and I'm not saying that Trump supporters are dictators or fascists, but the supporters Putin has are diehard. He could say anything, and they will say, yes, sir. He could go out and say, all the women are evil in our country, we should kill them all. And they'd be like, you got it, kill them all. I mean, it's that level of blind following that Putin has, the same that Trump has in America for a certain segment of our population, that most liberals or even moderate Republicans can't understand. And there is no understanding it. There's no understanding it. Putin has a much bigger cohort of those followers in Russia that literally would kill all the women if he said, or kill whoever if he said. So the intelligent folks in Russia who understand that this war is nonsense and was contrived and is not going well, they don't have a lot of voice, because the secret police, the military, the secret police, and the rich and powerful of Russia all are in Putin's camp, and they kiss his ass at all cost. And they control all the levers of power in Russia. So you're not going to really see a huge uprising of popular anti-war movement in Russia, because when they start to do that, they all die. They all get killed or end up in prison very, very quickly. So I get it. I get it. We wish they all had more freedoms to speak up against what seems like a bizarre war, but they can't. And if they do, they know they're risking their life and their families' lives. So it's a tough situation for them. That's why you don't see a lot about this. And I got off on this tangent because someone asked, why don't Russians do this, or how do they think this? And it's like, the government controls all the information. They control all the press. They control all the TV stations. They control everything, which is why dictatorships are scary, because once you control all the information, people are indoctrinated and punished if they don't believe the indoctrination. And it becomes a state that looks something more like North Korea. You're like, oh my God, people aren't even alive there. They're basically slaves of a system, and it sucks. Which is why many of us like democracy for all of its flaws, because we don't go in that direction. Anyway, I've gone off on too many tangents. I haven't even got to any of the news stories yet. So Tristan says, if the entirety of Ukraine falls, what does that mean for the rest of Europe? I find it hard to believe Putin will just be done after that point. Actually, Tristan, no. He's now been hit so hard. He thought, Vladimir Putin thought sincerely in his brain that they could take back Ukraine, because they had already taken back part of it. It was called Crimean Peninsula. In 2014, they just took it. They just took it from Ukraine, and no one did anything about it besides international protest. And so they've also, since 2014, been fighting a shadow war in eastern Ukraine, and basically have controlled the Donbass and Kirkuk regions. Again, as puppet shadow government, they've controlled it without much fuss. And so they actually honestly thought, well, no, we'll just take this, and this will be the first domino that falls, that we get back some of our territories in Eastern Europe. By the way, I actually always thought they'd start with the Baltic states. I thought I would have put money on invading Estonia, Lithuania, and somebody help me. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. They're small states. Russia could have taken those in 10 to 12 hours, but they decided to go with Ukraine first. However, back to your point, Tristan, they have now encountered such fierce resistance in Ukraine, it seems an impossibility that even Vladimir Putin, and all of his wisdom and power of controlling every aspect of Russian society, would think that he could actually take over more territories at this point. To try to take over another sovereign state in Eastern Europe, even Estonia, would cause a firestorm. All other states that used to be part of the Soviet Union would start arming themselves to the teeth, if they're not already, in order to push back any Russian aggression. So he thought he was starting with a soft target, and he's failed to even get the soft target. So Vladimir Putin can't possibly have any other designs to get anything else. That would make me think way more less of him than I already do. And I respect the guy. But as a tactician, as a military man, as a propagandist, as a tactician, he can't possibly think, he can't even take part of Ukraine as soft target. There's no way he's getting hard targets. Here's what he will likely get. I actually can't believe they didn't do this already, too. I actually can't believe they didn't force the Belarusian government to hold a referendum to rejoin Russia. That should have actually happened first. If I was advising Vladimir Putin, I'd have told him, dude, go to Belarus, make it look like it's a trendy, hip thing to do. Russia basically controls Belarus. Belarus is a puppet state. In fact, puppets have more liberated thought and movement than Belarus does. Russia owns Belarus. The dictator in charge of there, Lukashenko, is a tool bag. He is a horrible, idiot, savant human being. And Russia just says, dance, fool, dance. And he does anything they want. They should have gone to Belarus and said, by the way, you're going to hold a vote in your population to rejoin Russia. And the vote will be 99% in favor of rejoining Russia. And then, based on that, we'll move a bunch of Russian troops into Belarus, which borders Ukraine. And then we'll suggest to Ukraine, you guys should have a vote too. That would have been the smart play. But instead, they tried to do military aggression. And so the only thing Vladimir Putin's going to get out of this is parts of eastern Ukraine. And I think it still is easy for them to force Belarus to rejoin them. And they will do that in order to save face. So they're going to be like, look, everyone really wants to be part of Russia. The West is the one spoiling it all. Everyone wants to be part of Great Russian Empire again. And look, Belarus did it willingly. Look for that to happen in your lifetime, by the way, if not the next year. Okay. But I think I'm way behind on comments, and I want to get some stories because we're almost out for the whole hour anyway. Nova says, would any other states pick up arms to protect the sovereignty of Ukraine? No. Everybody will supply Ukraine. No one's going to send in soldiers. With the possible exception of Poland, but they haven't done it yet. So why would they do it now? Because Ukraine's winning. The Blind Barber says the Baltic states maybe because they'd be next. Boom! Look at you, Blind Barber, calling me out for what I was talking about 10 minutes ago. The Baltic states were actually the first target I would have assumed that Vladimir Putin would have went after. Ivan says Putin just wants to win. You are correct. Yevon Kim VT is saying, is Putin's speech meant to appeal to specifically Russian citizens? Because I thought his global reputation was already pretty bad. Yes, Yevon Kim VT. Vladimir Putin's speech, to rehash a couple things I've already talked about in the last 45 minutes. Vladimir Putin's speech at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time this morning said, I am calling up 300,000 troops out of reserve to fight the good fight in Ukraine. And here's why, Russian citizens. I don't care. Here's why. Okay, here, yeah, I can do that. Let me find the story. Looking for the story. Okay, I don't have a story on this. That's fine. I'll tell you. I'm going to pull up this story just because it makes sense too. So Vladimir Putin's. You want
to show it though?
I got it. So Vladimir Putin's rest of his speech today. And actually, I can just pull up. I can just Google it real quick. Putin speech today. So part of his speech was, "Hey, we're pulling up all these reservists, and one of the reasons why we're pulling up all these reservists, great Russian friends, is because the West is trying to destroy Russia. It's all the West's fault. Everything is the West's fault. Everybody wants to be part of Russia, and the U.S. and Europe are ruining it. They're ruining the Ukrainians. They've ruined the Poles. They've ruined the Estonians. Everybody wants to be part of Russia. Russians. Everybody loves us. Russians. But the West is ruining it, and they want to kill us all. It's all their fault. I'm being overly dramatic, but that's pretty much what he said. I'm paraphrasing, look, because he's talking in the video right now. I didn't realize that was a video. So I'm just paraphrasing what he's saying. He basically said, Russians, we have to pull up these reservists because Team West is trying to come kill us all. They want to come kill your babies. They want to kill your wives. They want to kill your dogs and cats and cattle. They want to kill us all. They hate Russia. They want to kill us all. Now, why am I being so extremist? Because that's what Vladimir Putin's speech is. It's an extremist response to rally national unity and blame all of the Russian military's failures on the West. And to whip up a fury and whip up fear that if you don't do your duty to Russia and show up as a reservist and support this war and support the government and support me personally, Vladimir Putin, if you don't do all that, you're basically all going to die because the United States is going to kill you all. And you're like, again, within Russia, they only know what their government tells them. So there's a significant part of the population that just believes it because that's all they've heard their whole lives. The rest of us are like, what? I mean, I'm not pretending to know what Joe Biden's foreign policy is and what the CIA is doing. But trying to kill all Russians is probably not high on their list and likely not happening because, I don't know, it's an impossibility. The United States and Team West can't kill all Russians and can't dissolve the Russian state. It can't happen, and no one's ever wanted it to happen. If we wanted to kill all the Russians and dissolve the Russian state, we would have done it during the Cold War when we actually hated Russia. So this is all, from an outsider's perspective, this is radical nonsense. But again, the Russian people only get news from their Russian leader. So this is what they're hearing. Whether enough of them believe it or not, I don't know. But I will show you this story that I did forget about, which is, and this is rare. This is really rare for Russia. Over 1,000 Russian protesters arrested after Putin mobilizes more troops. So the mere fact, 1,000 people, the population of Russia is 145 million. 1,000 people decided to go to the streets and get arrested. That number is minuscule. It's almost nothing. It's almost meaningless, except that it does have meaning. And here's why it has meaning to me, the Plaid Avenger, and why it should have meaning to you. These 1,000 people who just got arrested know they're probably going to be tortured and or die in prison. Not many people are willing to do that shit. Myself included, I'm a huge wimp, all right? I just want to drink wine and chill. If I have to put my life on the line, I'm not sure I'd do that for any government or country or cause. And so it's not surprising that not that many people, and not that many people in Russia, are willing to stand up to the system, which is completely and utterly full of shit, and call them out for being full of shit, knowing you're going to get the shit beat out of you and thrown in jail and maybe die. That's why 1,000 people doing it in Russian, that is of consequence to me. Because if we in America decided to protest about something, we know we're not going to die in prison. We know we're not going to be beaten to death by cops. We know if we go to a political rally, the government's not going to come and start shooting everyone. We know that. Now, inherent racism in America aside, we know if we go protest a war that the United States is conducting, we're not going to die. And we're not going to be in prison and beaten to death in prison. In Russia, it's guaranteed that you will. So the fact that 1,000 people went and protested in Russia is more important to me than a 1 million people protesting in America. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's of much greater consequence that even 1,000 people are willing to go to their deaths because they know what's going on is nonsense. So that story, again, it's still small. It won't affect Putin. He'll kill 1 million of his own people. He'll kill 2 million of his own people. He'll kill however many of his own people to make sure that the rest of the people don't hear them. So 1,000 people willingly going to their deaths, that's kind of a big deal in Russia because not many people want to do it. Not many people want to do it. So my hat's off to those 1,000 people. And again, by the way, I keep saying I try to be a balanced presenter. I'm not being anti-Russian, but at some point when you're in, you have the facts in front of you and you read news from everywhere on planet Earth and you understand how the world works, the concept that Vladimir Putin was pushing earlier today, that the United States, he can say Team West, but he means the United States. His argument is the United States wants to literally kill all Russians and wants to kill Russian culture. And that's why we have to invade Ukraine. That on its face is just nonsense. You just have to call it out and like, no, come on now. If Joe Biden came out and said, by the way, we need to drop nuclear weapons and kill all the Russians because Vladimir Putin's bad or because they want to invade America, I would call bullshit on that too. So it's like, no, come on, dudes, that's nonsense. But in Russia, it's much harder to call out people for bullshit than it is here in America. Okay, Daniel JHQ says, what would be the ultimate victory for Putin if he wins the law? If he wins the law, a tremendous amount of sanctions will be placed on, and he loses if he loses. Okay. So, Daniel, I'm not sure I understand war. There you go. He can't win this war without killing all the Ukrainians. That's what's become perfectly clear now. When Putin started this war, and he started this by himself, Russia was under no threat. Russian territory was under no threat. Russian people were under no threat. Putin has decided to rebuild the Soviet Empire, and he decided to start with Ukraine, the biggest piece of that. And he decided this by himself, and all of his supporters around him, which are terrified to disagree with him, said, yes, sir, that sounds great, let's do that. He decided to do this by himself. It has not gone well. He can now no longer win this war because he thought it would be easy. And he thought the Ukrainians enough of them would go along with this willingly. That has now been proven false, so he can't win. The only thing he can do is kill all the Ukrainians and take their territory. And by all of them, I mean he has to kill all of them. He has to nuclear weapon, atomic weapon, kill every human in Ukraine, and then be able to claim, well, we own this territory. That's the only way he wins. But does that sound like a win to you, Daniel? It doesn't sound like much of a win to anybody. Because everyone on planet Earth, including even the Chinese, who are his ally, will be like, whoa, dude, what did you just do there? What the hell? That's not cool. So Russia would become an utter outcast on the international stage. Probably all trade with them will be eliminated, although the Chinese will still take cheap oil from them. So Russia cannot win the war without killing all Ukrainians, which makes them lose anyway. That's my point. The only way Russia can take over Ukraine now is by losing. They lose so much to take over territory. They can't win. Everyone knows they can't win. The Ukrainians will not bow down. They won't take the knee. They're not going down. They're not going down without a fight, and the Russians can't win that fight without nuclear weapons. I say nuclear weapons. Without a bombing campaign that literally kills them all. Think Hitler's SS and carpet bombing of London, let's say. And even England didn't submit to Nazism, so even a carpet bombing might not be enough to quell the Ukrainians. So they can no longer win this war in any conventional sense. They can't. They just can't. Which also means they can't win anything else in Putin's greater dream to rebuild a Soviet empire. So there's a lot of recalculations going on in Putin's mind and in Putin's cabinet and in the Russian government right now. A lot. But I'm getting off topic as always. Let me get back to what he does want. So, Daniel, how many millions of comments am I behind?
You said you wanted that.
Okay, you know what? I'll keep going on comments. I'll keep doing it. This is going to be a 3-hour podcast, but we got this. Only here for JRP says he has a terminal illness. We already talked about that. I doubt that, seriously. Only here for the podcast. Welcome back. Only here says, apologies, you already mentioned this, but speaking of embarrassment to Russia, what do you make of their resorting to buying armaments from North Korea? Only here, they're not only buying weapons from North Korea, they're getting weapons from Iran. And again, they're getting weapons from Russia is a major armament supplier to planet Earth. Russia has the biggest stockpile of nuclear weapons. Russia has the biggest stockpile of atomic weapons. Russia probably has the biggest stockpile of conventional guns. Russia leads in all categories. Russia probably has more tanks than anyone on planet Earth. And yet, they're calling in 300,000 reservists and buying weapons from North Korea and Iran. As an outsider, this seems like it's way worse than we're even understanding. You're a major military power, and you're calling in reservists and buying weapons from non-powers. It's very bizarre. It's getting hard to figure out what's going on here. But you know what? I'm going to throw out a huge truth bomb to you right now. I'm going to throw out a huge prediction bomb to you. Possible prediction. I don't believe this will happen, but I'm calling it out because I want to be on record for this. This is so bizarre, and it smacks of such desperation that I actually think it's not impossible that Putin and his entire government gets toppled in the next 6 months. And I say that thinking it's impossible. It's impossible. But that's what we said, and you guys weren't alive. But that's what we said in 1989 when the Soviet Union imploded. No one saw it coming. They seemed as powerful, if not incompetent, as ever. There was no chinks in the armor. No one really was out there saying, hey, the Soviet Union's getting ready to collapse. No one was saying that. No one was saying in 1988, 1989, oh, the Soviet Union's probably getting ready to collapse. No one. And so I'm looking at what's happening in modern Russia going, this is starting to feel a little bit like 1988. Something just doesn't seem right. They're just not doing well, even though they're presenting a facade of doing really well. So, I don't think this would happen, but no one thought this in 1988 either. So, I don't know. It could happen. It could be that enough insiders are like, what is this idiot doing? We thought this guy was great, but now he's making us look embarrassing. And is he really going to use nuclear weapons and kill everybody? Is this guy going to start World War III? These are questions that now insiders within the Kremlin have to start asking each other, like, should we, overthrow this motherfucker? I don't know. What the hell should we do? Most of them, again, live in mortal terror of him and his apparatus. So it seems impossible, but again, things have seemed impossible in the past of history. No one predicted the Nazis were going to lose, by the way. They had a huge winning streak before they lost. So that's that. The Grand Poobahs up in the Hizzle saying they had naval infantry, which was their marine equivalent until they invaded Ukraine. That's why they took over Crimean Peninsula, Grand Poobah, to reestablish their maritime supremacy of the Black Sea and have a centerpiece for their navy. Babelzar says conscripts just don't cut it in war. They are cannon fodder. Thank you, Babelzar. You understand exactly what I was ranting about 55 minutes ago. Only here for the podcast says reservists are occupiers. Oh, am I already back?
Yep.
So I'm already back. Okay.
Yeah, some more to go.
Yeah, okay. I think I had a few to go. So reservists as occupiers. Mazu says if Russia wins the war and declares sovereignty part of Ukraine, I don't think China will stand with Russia in the UN voting as what you previously mentioned. I disagree, Mazuz, and now I'll get back to it, but I'll go with one more. Megafoon says culture shock, I guess, but why would individuals in a country as wealthy as Russia not have access to the internet?
I answered a lot of that.
Okay, good. Yeah, because the Russian government controls the internet. The Chinese government controls their internet. They don't have access to everything we have access to. Well, the smart people do, by the way. Hackers always get around all this stuff. Yeah. So, what did I mean by reservists as occupiers? Let me get back to the story now that we're over an hour. So, what is now the story? Here we go. Here's the story that also was unfolding simultaneously. I haven't even referenced this yet, my friends. This is why I got my blood pressure up starting at 8 a.m. So, also what was happening simultaneously, and this actually was started about 24 to 48 hours ago, is that there started to be whispers and full-fledged announcements that the Donbass region and other regions within Russia are going to start holding independence referendums to vote to rejoin Russia. Yeah, there you go. And what this storyline says is Russia's moves on referendums have echoes of Putin's action in Crimea 2014. Again, if you're smart about what's happening on the planet, if you're savvy, if you've taken world regions, if you've followed me for the years, none of this is surprising. This is the same old, same old, same old. This is the same freaking playbook that happened 8 years ago. And it's happening again right now. And it's going to happen, and it's going to happen this week. What am I referring to? And this is taglined off the reminder that someone said, reservist as occupiers. So what's getting ready to happen, my friends, has already happened before. And what's getting ready to happen is Putin is rightfully worried. He's not scared of anything, but he's rightfully worried about what's going on. He's losing confidence of his fellow countrymen, even though they're all too terrified to tell him that. And so he's going to basically cut bait and take the boat in. That's what I'm saying. Cut loose the bait, get the hell out of here. And what he's going to do is this week, they're doing with it literally within 96 hours. They said, we're going to have a vote. 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 All the places that Russian soldiers control, we're going to put up election polls and everyone's going to come vote and you're going to vote to join Russia. And there's two choices on the ballot. Join Russia or take a bullet in the back of your head right now. Which one do you choose? Which one do you want to choose? Choose A or B. And so in the Donbass and Luhansk regions, they're going to hold referendums. And this is the exact same way that Crimean Peninsula became reabsorbed into Russia back in 2014. The Russian military, without any markings, a bunch of soldiers in camo with no military insignia, no flags, no badges, no name tags, a bunch of military people suddenly appeared in Crimean Peninsula in 2014, took over the government, took over military installations, took over everything, took over all the 7-Elevens with guns, with no badges, no markings, no flags, no name tags. Took over and said, we're going to hold a referendum. Everybody gets to vote. Do you want to join Russia now or not? And 99% of people voted to join Russia. It was crazy. It's only crazy because what happened to the other 1%? Of course, this is fake. This is completely, utterly fake. It was a staged referendum. But the unnamed ski mask military were Russian. Although to this day, Russia says, we don't know who that was. You're like, dudes, come on. Come up with a better story than that. You're a major power on planet Earth in the 21st century. You're saying you don't know who took over. Okay, whatever. So they did that in 2014. Took over Crimean Peninsula. Held a referendum. 99% of the people voted to rejoin Russia. Boom, boom. Oh! Like quick as shit through a goose. They took over Crimean Peninsula and it was reabsorbed into the Russian Empire. No one on planet Earth recognizes this except like North Korea and Iran and maybe Venezuela. Who the hell knows? They're the countries that just say yes, sir, to Russia no matter what they do. So This is a playbook that the Kremlin is very familiar with, although this one has way bigger repercussions. So the reasons that, in reference to some comments already made in this thread about the Crimean Peninsula and the Russian Navy, Russia is always chafed under its loss of Ukraine, mostly because of the Crimean Peninsula. And I guess I should show you where the Crimean Peninsula is. Is there a map here? No one ever shows maps anymore. Russia has chafed over the loss of the Crimean Peninsula for decades because it is a port that holds 90%, 95% of the Russian military, the Russian Navy. So and this is for hundreds of years, or at least a couple hundred years. Crimean Peninsula has been the major Russian naval base where most of its ships are. That Russia wants to exert influence on the Black Sea, but also the Mediterranean Sea. And this is a part of a bigger power play game for hundreds of years between major powers. Crimean Peninsula is crucially, hugely important to Russia. So not surprising that Vladimir Putin was not only rightly pissed that they lost the Ukraine and lost the Crimean Peninsula as part of losing Ukraine, but it's not surprising that he played this gambit to get it back. The thing about the Crimean Peninsula and what's different about what he did today is Crimea was like literally 50 or 75% ethnically Russian. It has been forever a major Russian military base with Russian people and Russian this and Russian that, Russian the other. So it was a big loss to Ukraine, but it wasn't shocking, and it wasn't like the rest of Ukraine was like, hey, that's our homeland. It actually mostly was Russian. So not that shocking. What's more important about the territories that are now being taken over, let's see, Russian controlled Ukraine. Let's see if I can find a map of that real quick. What's much more important about today's things, here we go. Here's your map. Here we go. So the bigger issue right now is, it's not even a good one. There you go. Is that, and I'm going to start and end with this. Here's the meat and potatoes of this rant tonight. What's going on now is Vladimir Putin's playing the same game with Donbass, Luhansk, okay? These are major chunks of eastern Ukraine, and they do have significant proportions of ethnically Russian people in it, but not as much as Ukraine. Not as much as Crimea. Crimea was, say, like 70% Russian. Luhansk and Donetsk and Donbass, these places are more like 30 or 40% ethnically Russian. So it's a lot more Ukrainian people there. And even if it was 50-50, that's not the point. Even if it was half Russian, half Ukrainian, it's more that this is the strategic thing that you need to take away from this podcast. Vladimir Putin's replaying the same game. He's going to have elections in the next 96 hours in Donbass and Luhansk. Even these maps are not as good. There's Luhansk and Donetsk. Luhansk and Donetsk. These are major chunks of eastern Ukraine. He's going to play the same game. They're going to put together contrived, nonsensical, let's be frank, bullshit referendums. They will likely, everybody's going to go vote. They're going to go vote in a war zone in an election situation that was set up yesterday. Already, you know, you're like, I kind of got some red flag bullshits alerts going up on this one. So even if they're completely legitimate, the only people that are going to go out to a pro-Russian referendum station are pro-Russians. And they're going to vote pro-Russia. And even if they legitimately did it fairly, and 50% said go pro-Russia and 50% said no, I want to be part of Ukraine, the results are still going to be 99% pro-Russia. They might get smart and make it like 88% pro-Russia or even 77% pro-Russia, which they should do if they want to make it more legitimate. But the thing about dictators is they're so stupid. They're always like, no, everybody loves me. Everybody loves me. And so everybody's going to vote for me. And so the underlings under dictators are all imbeciles, and they don't want to piss off the boss. So they'll probably come back with 99% voted to join Russia. You're like, oh my God, you guys are kindergartners. Come on, make it look real at least. So what's going to happen in the next week? Luhansk and Donetsk are going to have referendums. 99% of the people will vote to join Russia. And within 24 hours after that, Vladimir Putin will come on national TV and make another speech welcoming Luhansk and Donetsk as part of free Russia and fully absorbed. And everyone on planet Earth needs to recognize that Russia has sovereignty over these two territories. Now, why am I suggesting this is a much bigger deal and a much bigger deal than the Crimean Peninsula takeover? Because now we're setting the stage for World War III, which Vladimir Putin knows and he's already warned people about in his speech earlier today. I said he mentioned several things today in his speech at 8 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. We're pulling up 300,000 reservists who will certainly be sent to Luhansk and Donetsk as occupiers. See, you thought I forgot, but I brought it back around. These idiots aren't prepared to fight. Their bodies. They're going to flood Russian bodies into Luhansk and Donetsk to oversee these sham elections, but more so just to literally have bodies in camo with guns all over the place so that it sets the stage that this is Russian territory. Look at all the Russian military that's here. There's 300,000 Russians hanging out here. Obviously, it's Russian. But more important than that, my friends, Putin also said, and by the way, we have nuclear weapons, and anybody that tries to attack Russian sovereign territory, will be treated as an aggressor and an attacker on Russian sovereign territory and dealt with judiciously with all of our full force. Boom! Now do you understand what I'm yelling about? Once they fake take over Luhansk and Donetsk, Russia can then make the claim that when the Ukrainian army starts to take back more of Luhansk or Donetsk, or even if the United States or Great Britain or France helps Ukraine in their fight to take back parts of Luhansk and Donetsk, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, can then say, you are actually attacking Russia. You just invaded Russia. You just sent tanks into the Luhansk region. Luhansk is part of Russia, bitches. You just invaded Russia. You can't invade Russia. They will actually go to the United Nations Security Council and say, this country just invaded our country and we want them sanctioned. Do you understand why I'm foaming at the mouth now? This is an entirely contrived play so that Russia can say, we have to use nuclear weapons. They just invaded Russia. The Ukrainians are trying to take the Donetsk region, which is Russia. They have voted to become part of Russia. Donetsk is Russia. You just attacked Russia. We're being attacked. We're being attacked. Oh my God, everybody, we're being attacked by the West. You get it now? That's full circle. That's what's going on here. That's why this is a big deal. And let's see what else I got here. That one, not that one, not that one. Not that one. Yeah. Exclusive. Also, literally within the hour, the chief of NATO, which is his name Jan? I always forget. He's such a handsome devil. Yeah, it is Jens Stoltenberg, the current head of NATO, said, hey, dudes, this is a dangerous escalation on Putin's part. So I'm yelling and screaming so that you understand, not just me, but you understand what Joe Biden understands. You understand what President Macron of France understands. You understand what the Prime Minister of Great Britain, a lady whose name I don't even know, understands because she just got into power. and you understand what Jens Stolberg understands at NATO. All of us understand what's going on here. This is a game. This is a game in which Vladimir Putin can convince his people, or just bullshit his people, that, look, this is what Vladimir Putin's going to tell his people. Look, NATO countries are openly attacking Russian territory, and they're killing Russians. They're killing Russians, which is his wet dream. And he's doing this by saying, Donbass voted to join us, so they're Russian territory. So now any Russians in Donbass who get killed by Ukrainian military bombs are being killed by NATO bombs. Do you get the bigger picture now? That's why this is such a huge and dangerous provocation and a genuine escalation. And again, most people on planet Earth, maybe even the Chinese government, maybe even the Indian government, most people on planet Earth are just trying to live their lives. They don't understand how much more dangerous the game has just become. Because Vladimir Putin has basically said in his speech this morning, we're taking what we want in Ukraine. And by the way, he's doing it to try to cut his losses and pretend like he's won. He's going to go to the Russian people and be like, look, we liberated Donbass and Luhansk. We liberated them. They voted to join us. We liberated them. We're good people. We're freedom-loving people. We're free. We love free, love, love, love. We're good guys. We're good guys. We're good guys. We liberated them. They voted to join us. And now they're being killed by the West. So we have to go kill the other people. This is the cycle of war that becomes exceptionally dangerous when you have leaders like this that have basically boxed themselves into a corner in a war they thought would be easy. It has become not easy. And not only has it not become not easy, they're losing it, which means they're losing face. And so they've now gotten, Vladimir Putin has now got to the dangerous territory that dictators get into of doing anything to save face. Doing anything to save face, including this falsified referendum, calling it Russian territory, and calling any attempts by the Ukrainian army that's being funded and armed by NATO countries, calling any provocation by Ukraine to try to get its own territory back an act of war by NATO. That's why it's dangerous. That's what's going on here. That's why I got my panties in a bunch and have suggested this is a huge, big deal. There you go. That's it. I'm out. That's what I'm talking about. Let me go now back to the chat room and see if there's anything that I've not answered or if I've confused you any more on anything. But back to Mazuz's comment. If Russia wins the war and declares sovereignty part of Ukraine, I don't think China will stand with Russia in the UN voting. What you previously mentioned. That remains to be seen. China might, because China, again, is looking at Taiwan and several other territories going, hey, we think those places are ours, the same way that Russia thinks Ukraine is theirs. So China so far has supported Russia in their claim that they own Ukraine. What did I say that right? China has stood by Russia so far in their claim. That's why I got confused in my brain. Their claim that they own Ukraine. Kind of rhyme. So China might double down as well. But Putin is definitely double downing. He's double downing, saying, I've lost this war, but now I'm going to win it. And I'm going to win it by saying all I was here for was to liberate the Russians in eastern Ukraine. And I'm going to do that. And they're going to become part of Russia. And we win. We've won. We liberated. We're great people. We won. And now if anybody messes with that territory, I can then also say, look, Russia, the West is trying to kill Russians because they hate us. So he's looking at that as his new avenue towards winning like Charlie Sheen. Whether China will double down and stand with him, that's anybody's guess. I kind of with you, Mazuz. I think China won't. But then China wants to make the same claim whenever they finally invade Taiwan, which could be coming at any second. Megafoon says, culture shock, I guess, but why would individuals in the countries, would not have access to the internet? Some of them do, but only the smart ones. And by the way, megaphone. I'll answer in a different way than Katie did. Do not all Americans have access to the internet? Do not all Americans have access to a free and open internet? No. No government. Our government isn't banning anything. And how many people in the United States think the last election was fake? And they have all the information in the world, all of it. And I think 40% of them think it was fake. And probably 30% of them think that aliens ran it. I mean, it's a new world we live in. There's too much information. And the government can manipulate things, but even if they don't, humans seem to want to manipulate themselves into believing what they want to believe to make themselves feel better about whatever's going on. Let's see. Daniel Koo says, would this go down as one of the greatest fails in terms of wars if Russia loses, second to the Emu Wars? Russia has a great history of losing wars. Even when Russia eventually loses this war, which actually, again, they already have, they'll claim victory by liberating the East. But again, history is not going to be kind. But even if they were to be forcibly ejected from eastern Ukraine by the Ukrainians and their allies, even if that were to pass, go look up the 1905 Japanese Russo-Japanese War. If you want to talk about embarrassment, 1905 Russo-Japanese War. Look that up. That's like figure 3 in the dictionary under embarrassment. So this would be nothing compared to some other wars Russia's lost. This would be not even on the scale of the Russo-Japanese War, not even on the scale of failure of Russia's invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 to 1989. Russia does not have a great scorecard in the last couple hundred years, which is why perhaps they have, I don't know, some sort of confidence issues, or I am not a therapist. I'm certainly not a therapist to sovereign states. But yeah, they certainly have this concept in Russia, at least in the leadership, at least a portion of the leadership, that really feels the whole world's out to get them. Team West's only objective on planet Earth is to destroy Russia. Everyone's out to get them. Everyone hates them. That they are underdogs all the time, and that they don't belong to any team. They're solo warriors who've just been screwed time and time again for hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, that's one way to look at your situation in life. America does not look at themselves that way. Britain doesn't. China even doesn't. China even fully admits, yeah, we got screwed for 200 years, but we're back. Russia just can't seem to get past it, though. They just, and again, I love Russia. I've been there many times. Russians are good people, but their governments are just determined that the world wants to kill them all. And you're like, how do you talk somebody out of that? I don't know. I think the Russian government has actually been more offended by the fact that no one cares. And that sounds callous, but it's actually, I meant in a good way. I think a lot of people in Russia, in Russia's government, that, especially old people like me or way older, lived through the Cold War. They lived through the embarrassment of losing the Cold War. That their whole communist experiment utterly failed. They were left destitute, broke, riddled with corruption. And then it got worse in the 90s. So I think that the old people in Russia just look at the whole experiment with communism and then the dabbling experiment with capitalism and democracy as just like failure after failure. And they just have this instinct that everyone's out to get us and nothing works and everybody hates us. And you're like, most of us don't. And they're more offended by the fact that no one cares. That's where I started this rant. I don't think the Russian politic quite can ever fathom that no one in America just gives a shit. That probably most Europeans, they just don't give a shit. Most Australians, actually most Chinese, just don't give a shit. I think that hurts their feelings more. That they lost the Cold War, and then after that, no one cared. I mean, what's worse, being dumped on by a girl or a guy that broke your heart, or the fact that a month later they didn't recognize you on the street? I mean, both hurt. But it seems like that's Russia's, again, the political body, not the humans who live in Russia. Most people are just living their lives. They don't give a shit about international politics. But I think the people in charge of Russia for decades, if not centuries now, have just been beside themselves, upset that the world doesn't care as much about them as they like to think. And I say that in a positive context. I think a lot of Russians, and maybe the Russian government thinks, oh, the West hates us and wants to kill us. And the reality is the West doesn't give a shit. I think that's a better attitude than we hate you and want to kill you. We actually just don't give a shit. I think it's one of the powers of America. We generally don't remember or give a shit about anything. We're just like, hey, what's going on? That's cool. Oh, do we have a war with you? We don't remember it. Whatever. What's going on today? That's one of the powers of America. But in Russia, it's actually seen as a detriment and more of it's offensive that they're not respected. They're not respected that they're the first people that put a man in space. They're not respected that they were winning the Cold War at one point. They're not respected that they tried this new system that was going to have equality for all of its citizens. They're not respected for anything, and they're forgotten. So, and I remember this. You guys probably don't remember this. It was just a throwaway line at one point, right before Barack Obama left office. He said something to people like me was very telling. And not that many people paid attention to it, but it was very telling. He was like in an interview or just like at a podium answering questions from the press. I can't even remember what the context was. But a reporter, somebody asked him something about, well, aren't you worried about what Russia thinks about this? And Barack Obama, he answered very genuinely, and he wasn't trying to be offensive. He just said, oh, well, no, I'm not. We're not worried what Russia thinks about this. Russia is a smaller scale regional power now. They're not playing on the global stage. They're not part of this conversation. I understood that. He was telling the truth. He's like, no, Russia's a regional power. They don't really affect anything in the world anymore. I understood that. Political people around the world understood that. And you have to understand how offended the Russians were by that statement. And it encapsulates what I'm trying to express to you. I think the Russians' frustrations in the modern world have less to do with them thinking that we actually want to come kill them as them thinking that they just don't matter because we don't care. And again, which one is more offensive? I'd like to think not caring is more offensive than hating your guts and wanting to kill you. But apparently that's not the case in the Russian government's mind. That's what a lot of this is about. And Vladimir Putin's flexing of his muscles, literally and physically, and symbolically with the military. He has done a lot of this, I think, to try to reestablish Russia's role in the world as an important power. And on that level, I don't blame him. Nobody wants to be dismissed or ignored. And Russia is a major military power, although it doesn't look good right now. And Russia is important for international affairs. But the way that Vladimir Putin has decided to make Russia important again is in all the bad ways. So instead of making Russia important again by working together to fight climate change or pollution or nuclear proliferation or take your pick, Vladimir Putin is, in his mind, said the only way we Russia can become relevant again is to exert our power and threaten people and kill people and threaten people with nuclear annihilation. So that's why, again, my blood pressure is slightly lowered now. But that's why my blood pressure has been up all day, because I have understood that what Vladimir Putin said today was a escalation. He's basically said, I'm unhappy. I think Russia's being dissed. I thought Russia's been dissed my entire adult life, which he does believe and has said out loud. He does believe that the dissolution of the Soviet Union was the greatest catastrophe ever in Russian history. He does believe that they should rebuild the Soviet Union. He's made this clear. This is not me speculating. He's kind of made this clear. And now that he thought after 20 years of ruling Russia and getting their mojo back and getting their economy back on track and getting their military up to par, he thought the time was right to rebuild Russian authority internationally and perhaps reestablish a Russian empire internationally. And he started this 7 months ago and has been horribly rebuked, and challenged on the international stage and failed on just simply the military front. And so he's doubling down to finish where I started this podcast. Instead of admitting any defeat or changing trajectory, he's doubling down. He's doubling down saying, I told you we were being attacked. I told you the West is trying to kill us. And now we're starting to walk towards a slow walk towards a possible nuclear interaction where we have to defend Eastern Ukraine. I'm sorry, Russia. Used to be Eastern Ukraine. Now it's Russia. And we might have to start talking about atomic and nuclear weapons to defend Mother Russia from those people that want to kill us, like I've been telling you for decades. They just want to kill us all. That's where we're at. That's why it's a big deal. Thank you for tuning in. Did I answer all the questions? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Let me shout out all the folks that... by the way, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I don't think we're going to have a nuclear war tomorrow. But I think the possibility of a nuclear interaction in Eastern Europe has greatly increased based on what's happened in the last 24 hours. Let me shout out to XYXYLL, like I can pronounce that, who subscribed to Tier 1. Thank you for subscribing, XYXYLL. And who's that face? Who's that face they have there? Because that's a cool face. It looks like the leader of Ukraine. How'd they get that? How'd they get that icon? What? Daniel Koo says, why do you think he sits like that all the time? I missed that one. Kind of hunchback with two hands on the table. I don't know what that's a reference to, but if you send me a picture, I'll try to figure that out, Daniel. Emma's 2112 in the hizzle saying, I watched a behavior analysis react to his speech, and one thing he noted was all the phones in the background are supposed to be just show power and importance, even though a single phone could get the job done. Never thought about that. Why do we even have phones that sit on desks anymore? We have these things called cell phones. Good call, Emma's. Bobblestar says, how bad do things need to get for Russia TV to start playing Swan Lake? First, thank you for that, Bobblestar. First time chatter from Dispatch Joa. Why didn't we help Ukraine in 2014 like we are doing now? Boom! That's a pertinent question, first time chatter. Because, first time chatter, Dispatch, the Crimean Peninsula crisis was occurring during a greater Ukrainian internal crisis. So if you go back and do a little research, look at kind of Ukrainians, you might be able to Google it. Hell, I might be able to Google it. Let's see if I can do my keywords. I'm a master of keyword search. So let's do Ukraine, I think 2014. Civil war seems harsh. So let me call it civil unrest. Let's see what that gleans us on the interweb. Boom, I found it. I am a good searcher. So if you search for 2014 unrest, you'll find out that in that year, and actually 2 years leading up to it, maybe 3 or 4, there was a lot of unrest in Ukraine. It was bordering on a civil war. Some might even call it a civil war. In 2014, I believe, is when there was something actually called the Ukrainian Revolution, or the Second Revolution, or the Third Revolution. So the Ukrainian state was in a state of disarray internally. And the Russians took advantage of that to take over the Crimean Peninsula. And they did it very quickly, very succinctly, by the way, in a very well-managed, well-choreographed military maneuver. Which, by the way, as an old person who watched that unfold, is another reason I thought, oh, well, Russia will take over Ukraine easy. They took over the Crimean Peninsula in 48 hours. So to answer your question, Dispatch, it happened very quickly, and it happened in a time of civil unrest / civil war / a revolution occurring within Ukraine that was very chaotic. So there were no outside players. Nobody was there ready to help, and no one really saw it coming, and it was chaos. So the speed actually was probably the primary thing. If Russia had announced we're going to come take over the Crimean Peninsula, probably Western forces might have lent weapons or helped in some way, but it happened too fast. So that's the quick answer for that. The recent tribulation we had started in February of this year, just 7 months ago. Unprovocated, Ukraine is not in a state of unrest or civil war. It's still a little not great, but it wasn't chaos, and there wasn't mass protest occurring or a fight for political power. So Ukraine was stable in February of 2022, and Russian forces invaded it. And by the way, Russian forces were building up their forces for months prior that everyone in the world knew about, especially the U.S. intelligence agencies. So, we can look at the satellites and see there's like 1 million soldiers bordering Ukraine right now. So everyone saw it coming. It was unprovocated. It wasn't quick. Everybody knew what was going on and saw it happening. And there was lots of diplomacy or diplomatic efforts to stop it from happening, and the Russians lied straight through their teeth for months, saying, "We're not going to invade. What are you guys talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about invasion? No one's going to invade. What the hell are you talking about invasion? We're not. What'd you say? Invasion? No, I know it's talking about invasion." And then they invaded. I mean, again, I'm not anti-Russian. I'm saying, yeah, they just kind of lied through their teeth. This is just historical record. I mean, we watched it unfold in December, and January, and February of just this year. So when all of this was happening, then Western forces, allies of Ukraine, allies of democracy, saw this coming and started to funnel in money and weapons and diplomatic efforts and everything else. So entirely different situations. Dispatch, does that make sense? Dr. Knocker's up in the hizzle. Dr. Knocker says, my man, Dr. B out here doing God's work. Is there any chance of reviving the Minsk agreement? Oh my God. I love Dr. Knocker's diplomatic drops with the Minsk agreement. I don't look for that to be dusted off anytime soon, Dr. Knockers, but I just love saying the Minsk agreement. It's so cool. Only here for the podcast says, why stop at Donetsk and Luhansk? Why not just hold a vote in all occupied territories and just declare the entire current front line, the Russian border? I'm sorry, only here for the podcast. That's exactly what they're doing. Pretty much anywhere that Russia currently occupies, that's what they're going to do. I was just picking those two big territories because they have names. But you're right. They're doing it anywhere Russian troops currently control. They're going to, in 96 hours, hold a vote and say, it's Russia. And Vladimir Putin will be like, I recognize it. It's part of Russia. So therefore, when any Ukrainian army, think about the preposterous nature of this. So you could be a man or woman in the Ukrainian army who was ejected from a town in Donetsk. That's where you lived your whole life. Lived your whole life in Donetsk. Your whole family's in Donetsk. All your kids are in Donetsk. And you join the Ukrainian army to help liberate Donetsk. And in the next 96 hours, Russia could say, this is Russian territory. You're Ukrainian. You're not allowed to come back to your home, city, state / country, or even visit your kids because they're Russian citizens now. Bam! They're Russian citizens now. Bitch, take a step back. You're Ukrainian. That's how preposterous all this is. And everybody knows it. But again, it's being done for the reasons I've outlined for the last 30 minutes. Okay. Ivan says, thanks for the podcast today, Learn. Thank you, Ivan. Let's see. Dispatch. Joa says, thank you. Thank you, Dispatch. I would rephrase the question to, why would Ukraine stop at Donetsk and Luhansk and don't go for Crimea? They already own Crimea. I'm sorry, Dispatch, if I did not make that clear. They already did this in Crimea. They held a vote. It was 99% in favor of joining Russia. 1 week later, or 2 weeks later, the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, got on an international cast and said, we welcome Crimea as part of Russian territory. Even though no one else recognizes this, Russia says Crimea is part of Russia and it's packed to the gills with Russian troops right now. So again, they're playing the same game now with Donetsk and Luhansk and any other territory that Russian military currently holds on to. Only here says, why doesn't Putin claim the area to the south? He will. And let's see. Okay. And Dispatch says, I meant Ukraine to regain Crimea. For Ukraine to do it. Well, if Ukraine can physically take it over militarily, they will. And the rest of the world, besides North Korea and Iran and Venezuela, will say, yes, Crimea does belong to Ukraine, and we recognize that. But I've gone 47 minutes over my podcast time because I had such a delight chatting with you all. And I'm so sorry, I should have said this like an hour ago. Is anybody here? Is anybody still in here for one? Is anybody in this chat room? And if you're in this chat room and you're in my class, just email me right now and I'll give you some points for hanging out here. Yes, because you never created a crazy credit column or created Where's Waldo, so I can't go forward until these things happen. I'll try to get the TAs to do it if they know how. Oh, cool. I'm getting a bunch of worry here. Yes, I have your emails queued up. We're going to create a column called Crazy Credit. For all you guys yelling out right now that you're here, including Mr. Manolo, who says, how about some wine or whiskey for no students? Yes. And first-time chatter from a bunch of people. If you're in the class right now, email me at joboyer@bt.edu, and I will get you, let's say, 15 points for hanging out with me for an hour and a half. And maybe I'll create this into a quiz as well, but nobody seems to care about the quizzes anymore. I just give points to people that hang out here. So email me. Don't yell me out here. Email me. Give me your name, your real name, and your Twitch name. And say, I was there when Vladimir Putin started World War III. And I'll get you some points for all being awesome. Thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully I enlightened you about some world events and how politics works. Hopefully I didn't frighten you too much about an impending World War III. I am serious about it, though. It is a interesting time where Putin is doubling down. As has happened multiple times in my lifetime, we have now reached the next juncture where we're all watching a dictator to see, will this person start World War III? This isn't the first time. I think you all know the answer to the question, did anybody else do it before? No, obviously they haven't. We haven't had a World War III. But will this be the human that decides his pride is greater than human lives, than millions or billions of humans' lives? Will this man's pride lead to millions of deaths? We don't know. It hasn't happened yet. And we're always got our fingers crossed it won't. But one never knows. Boom! Thanks for tuning in to World Regional Geography, a.k.a. World Regions Podcast. I'm Professor John Boyer here at Virginia Tech, home of the Fighting Hokies. I love this class. I love Twitch. And thank you all for hanging out and chilling out and learning some shit with me tonight. Let's all go have a drink. And as always, party on.